The Italian Renaissance was a period of great change in Italy and throughout Europe beginning in the 14th century. One of the central parts of the Italian Renaissance was the rise of great families to wealth and power. While these families shared many similarities, each one took part to their own path of greatness. Various political, economic, and religious factors allowed these individuals and families to gain immense wealth, influence, and power throughout the Renaissance. Here we explore just two of the great families of the Renaissance, the Medici and the Borgia, who used different means of achieving this wealth and power.
The Italian Renaissance was a period known for its great works of art and architecture. This artistic revolution was fueled by the system of patronage, where wealthy individuals or families commissioned great artists to create grand works in their names. The Medici were some of the greatest patrons of the Renaissance. Patronage was an essential tool that the Medici used to gain power and influence in the Florentine Republic and eventually allowed them to establish themselves as absolute rulers. During this period, religion was of great importance to both the Medici and the people of Florence. As such, one of the greatest challenges the Medici faced as bankers and moneylenders was the sin of usury. If the people of Florence saw the Medici as sinners and usurers, they would never be able to maintain power.
In order to avoid this grievous sin, Cosimo il Vecchio commissioned some of the greatest artists of the time to create religious works as an act of charity. He paid for the reconstruction and decoration of the church of San Lorenzo and filled it with not only religious imagery, but also the Medici family crest to show their dedication to the church and gain power and notoriety with the public. Cosimo's largest and most expensive project was the construction of the monastery of San Marco. Cosimo hired Fra Angelico to create a stunning altarpiece and adorn the monastery with religious frescoes. This was the largest act of private patronage ever funded, and in the minds of the people of Florence absolved the Medici of all former sins of usury. Through patronage and charitable acts, Cosimo was able to establish the Medici as the most powerful and respected family in the Florentine Republic. Over the next few years, the Medici continued to associate themselves with the church by comparing themselves to the three wise men from biblical tales. Cosimo and his son Piero both commissioned many images of the three wise men, such as the Adoration of the Magi, which was on display in the Florentine palace, and even played the three wise men in religious processions. This further cemented the Medici as religious, or perhaps even biblical figures in the Florentine Republic. However, the way the Medici utilized patronage changed dramatically after they were pushed into exile by the radical monk Girolamo Savonarola. He believed that the Medici represented everything that was wrong with Christian society, and after they were driven from the city, he ordered a burning of all the indulgent and pagan art that they had commissioned. The Medici were exiled from Florence until they returned with a vengeance in 1512. Their return brought back not the old art of charity and religion, but the art of power and tyranny. In 1512, Giovanni de' Medici, a son of Lorenzo the Magnificent, used his connections with the church to bring the Medici back to Florence. At the time, Giovanni was a cardinal, and in 1513 he became Leo X, the first Medici pope, solidifying the Medici's position of power in the church. Once the Medici were able to use papal authority to regain control of Florence, they ruled it not indirectly from the sidelines, as they had before, but as clear and authoritative rulers and dictators. To display the immense power they wielded to the people, they again turned to patronage and hired artists to build imposing monuments to their success. The next Medici to rule, Alessandro, commissioned architect Antonio da Sagnolo to build a massive fortress, the Fortezza da Basso, overlooking the city. This massive, imposing structure was meant to intimidate the people of Florence and served as a constant reminder of who was in charge. Alessandro used art as a tool of intimidation and fear, and in 1532 he used this power to become the first official Duke of Florence. The ultimate show of power came when the family moved into the seat of the old republic, the Palazzo Signoria, and made it their own private palace, declaring to all of Florence that the Republic was dead and that the Medici were in full control. They even hired artists such as Giorgio Vasari to redecorate the palazzo, filling it with images celebrating the Medici dynasty as a symbol of their victory. Through these acts of intimidation and self-promotion through patronage, the Medici were able to create a dynasty that would last until the end of 1720, when the last Medici died without a male heir. Without the power of patronage to avoid usury, gain favor with the people, and then intimidate them into submission, the Medici could never have achieved the great wealth and power they did.
The Borgia, on the other hand, achieved unimaginable power not through the system of patronage, but rather through the church. The church during the 15th century was still one of the most powerful organizations in Western Europe. One of the main reasons why the Catholic Church was so powerful was because of the fall of the Roman Empire in 476 AD. There was a great power vacuum in the Western world. Slowly, the vacuum was filled not with lords and kings, but rather the Catholic Church. And centuries of unchecked power produced the juggernaut that was the Catholic Church during the 15th century. In fact, the Church not only had a religious monopoly on Europe, but it also had one of Europe's strongest economies. Disregarding the Papal States, the Church owned up to 1/3 of the land in Western Europe, whether it was in France, England, Spain, or the Holy Roman Empire.
The Borgia were originally a relatively well-off noble family under the crown of Valencia. Yet, the story of the Borgia really begins with Alphonse de Borja, who would later be known as Pope Calixtus III. Alphonse was originally a law professor turned diplomat turned cardinal. He was later appointed pope in 1455 and stayed in power for 3 short years. The rise of Alphonse de Borja really put the Borgia family on the map, and Alphonse was described as, quote, "My son, you one day will be called to be the ornament of your house and your country. You will be invested with the highest dignity that can fall to the lot of men. After my death, I shall be the object of your special honor. Endeavor to preserve in a life of virtue. By none other than future Saint Vincent Ferrer." Pope Calixtus III also made Rodrigo Borgia, his nephew, and future Pope Alexander VI, a cardinal and cemented what was the Borgia family legacy. As years passed, the Borgia family grew stronger and closer to the Church, who was the most powerful organization in the Renaissance Europe at that time. The Borgia family, in their ambitious quest to become the most powerful family in the world, and they were ambitious. I mean, come on, the family motto is either Caesar or nothing. How is that not a red flag? Made some enemies with some powerful families of the time like the Medici and the Sofresa. Yet, even with their numerous enemies, they had enough friends in the church and money. They also engaged in patronage, but not to the extent that the Medici practiced it, to elect another pope from their family.
Hello and welcome to Late Night with Rohit. Today our special guest will be Pope Alexander VI. That's right, audience, hold your applause. Otherwise known as Rodrigo Borgia. Hello, Rodrigo. May I call you Rod?
No, call me Rodrigo.
Oh. Why do we get him? Why does no one living come to our show? Well, that's fine. Only this time for you, okay? Okay, fine, okay? Sorry for the technical difficulties, Rodrigo. A big Rod, should I say? Let's get this interview started, shall we?
I would like you to call me by my full name, Rodrigo Lenzol y de Borja.
Okay, Rod. Let's get straight into it. Your papacy has been controversial, to say the least. Many label you as the worst pope in the history of the Catholic Church. Now, I don't personally like to make any judgments, and my viewers know this, even though this is the first episode. But that's a pretty impressive accomplishment, to say the least. The worst pope of all time? There were some pretty bad popes, I can tell you that. But tell me more about that.
Whatever. What people don't take into consideration is that I revolutionized the system. The papacy just couldn't handle me and my flair.
Excuse me, did you just underhand your family corruption and murders, and you label them as flair? Let me remind you that your family only came into power because of the
I have to interrupt you there. I was a very qualified candidate of the papacy. I ruled it like a military commander, which is what I thought would be best.
But the papacy is not that. And let me finish what I said, Rod. Your family only came into power because your uncle was the Pope, Pope Calixtus III. And then after years of adultery, incest, theft, simony, murder, your family gained enough power and reputation to buy you the papacy. I wouldn't be surprised if your house was on Game of Thrones.
We did no such thing. Fine, we may have done all of those things to a degree.
A degree? Wow, is that an understatement or what? Regardless, I think the most lasting legacy of your pathetic papacy is the fact that you had kids before and during it. In fact, instead of hiding your kids, you straight up gave them titles of nobility. Seriously, how does a man have that much confidence?
I'm glad someone sees it like that. You see, it didn't matter if I had kids, even if I did, which I didn't. But it wouldn't matter because the church couldn't have done anything. I'm a Borgia.
Great point, and what a legend, ladies and gentlemen. Alright, I have to ask one last thing. I have to ask about the banquet of chestnuts. What happened? And was it real, Big Rod?
Okay. Alright. I don't normally tell this to people, but you're a friend. So I'll go ahead. It was just a party that got out of hand, and the media blew it up. You know how it is.
Oh my god! I don't think I've heard a bigger lie in my entire life. Now, first off, there was no such thing as the media in your time, so there's that. Also, there are many sources that all claim that the banquet was a festival thrown by your son, mind you, and was also held in your residence, which had 1,000 rooms. How do you explain that? Then, 50 honest and naked courtesans disrobed on the floor, and then things got out of hand. Of course, many dispute that this ever happened, but many agree that knowing you, the fine and pious man that you were, this definitely happened. What do you have to say to that, Rod?
I was just too much for historians. I'll leave it at that.
All right, that's all the time we have. Join us tomorrow for late night. What's that? We're canceled. Wait, what? This is our first show. That doesn't make any what?
The Medici and the Borgia were not the only great families to come out of the Renaissance era. Many others, like the Sforza, Este, and Aragon, also took their own paths to greatness. The Renaissance was truly defined by the rise of these and many other great families, and it was the determination and wealth of these families, as well as the economic and political factors of the Renaissance, that allowed them to do so.